Hi, this is Ethan. Welcome to Chapter 2. In these videos, we'll be examining some of the more advanced features of Bootstrap, including JavaScript, which allows for programmability of plugins and other Bootstrap features. I'm going to assume that you're comfortable now with HTML5, CSS, and know a little bit of JavaScript too. For this example, we're going to be using Bootstrap Validator. Bootstrap Validator is a plugin that allows you to validate form fields, kind of like what is shown here. When a form field doesn't have the desired value or range of values, or it breaks a rule that has been specified in the validator, the field will be highlighted in red with an X or some other visual cue shown next to the field in addition to a message telling the user what's wrong with their input. Here's the code that's included with this example. Since we're already familiar with the basics of Bootstrap, let's start with an empty Bootstrap HTML file. It has only the basic includes, such as the Bootstrap CSS up here, and the Bootstrap JavaScript files as well, and jQuery. We went over this stuff in Chapter 1, so we won't repeat it here. The first thing I'm going to do is go to bootstrapvalidator.com. And click here to download the source files. We can download the release version. We don't need the source code right now because we won't be making any changes to it. The release version is compiled and minified, meaning that it's been shrunk down for optimal performance. Once we've downloaded the validator, we can go into the dist folder, D-I-S-T, right here. There are two subfolders included, CSS and JS. This contains two versions of the Bootstrap Validator CSS. We'll copy both versions into our example folder. There. We'll also need some JS files. There's a language subfolder which includes some ability to do translations. Let's grab all of this for right now. Those will go in the JS folder here. Good. The only difference between Bootstrap Validator JS and Bootstrap Validator.min.js is that one of them has been minified. This one. Notice how it's compressed. This makes for a smaller download footprint. The same is true for the CSS files, so we really only need one version of these. But let's leave them both for now. Let's get back to the index.htm. Recall this is just an empty Bootstrap file right now, without any actual content. To make the code more readable, put the JavaScript at the top. Recall from Chapter 1 that for optimal performance in a production application, these should actually be included at the bottom, after the body tag. This will ensure that any script processing starts and finishes after the main page content has been loaded. I'm going to add references to the CSS for Bootstrap Validator that we downloaded. We're also going to add a reference to the Bootstrap Validator JS. JS stands for JavaScript. There. Although we've included the validator files, we've still got an empty page. Let's create a registration form. I'm going to copy and paste some of the basics of this form, including the container and panel that will hold it. In the panel heading, put registration. There, we've got an empty form. This next part I'll type by hand. Create a form, give it an ID of registration form, method of post, a class of form horizontal, and no action for right now. I'll next paste in 5 form groups to save us some time. These will house the individual form elements. Inside of each form group, we'll put a label and a div pairing, inside which the input elements will go. We'll do 5 of these as well. There. Each form group has a label and a div. Let's add the input elements now. The first input will be an email address. Be sure to associate our for attribute with the email field in order to set the focus on that input when the label is clicked. The next input will be a password. Input of type password. Do the same thing with the for attribute. We'll also ask the user to confirm their password. And point the for attribute at the confirmation field. Next, we'll ask the user for a registration type. This will be a select dropdown with two possible values, basic and premium membership. Finally, we'll add a submit button that the user clicks once they are done filling out the form. Rather than have a label and a separate column for this, there's a more elegant solution. That is to give this a total width of call medium device 6 with a call MD offset of 2 to match the labels above it. We'll also want to fill in values for all of these labels. There. Let's take a look. Pretty good so far. Remember, since we gave this form a class of form-horizontal, that the labels will display adjacent to the form fields. On smaller devices, like this one, the iPhone 5, the labels stack nicely above the input fields. The call medium device offset of 2 down here causes the submit button to line up nicely with the input fields. Now that we've got the form looking the way we want, let's use some JavaScript to wire up the validation plugin. Down at the bottom of our code, we'll create a script block. The type attribute became optional as of HTML5, but we'll include it anyway as a good practice. Since we've included jQuery, we have access to jQuery's document_ready function. This is a function that gets fired off after the document's already been loaded and the DOM is considered ready. DOM stands for Document Object Model, which essentially refers to everything that's been created on this page. First thing we'll do is we'll create a variable called Validator. We'll use a jQuery selector to grab our registration form. And to that, we'll append Bootstrap Validator function. Inside of the Bootstrap Validator function, create what's called an object literal. An object literal is JSON, which stands for JavaScript Object Notation, and it's a way of passing complex object information into a function. The validator has a fields property, of which each member of this fields collection refers to one of the names up here. Let's start with the email field as an example. We used these brackets to indicate that this name here, email, contains another object nested inside of it. For more information about JSON, go check out json.org. Each field has a general message property. For now, we'll just set that as email address is required. This is a message that's issued if there are no other validation rules present. Let's define some of the validation rules. These are called validators. This is also a collection of objects. For our first validator, let's use a not empty validator. What this basically says is that the field is required and may not be empty. We'll set a single property called message. It says, please provide an email address. Let's take a look at what happens. We have our form, and if we try to submit it, validation fails, and it says, please provide an email address. There's the message that's being displayed. If we hadn't provided this attribute right here, but we still had the not empty validator, then we'd expect this message to be displayed right here that says email address is required. Like so.